you so much for tapping in, turning on, tuning in with Enchantress, the Babbler, on our revolutionary rise, the high that is happening right now at this moment in time. I woke up in such a great mood, right? Anyways, maybe it's the sweetness of the strawberry full moon, right? We get to enjoy at this moment in time. But either way, before we get into astrology, let's just meet ourselves for just this quiet moment in this precious moment in time, right? Hey. Either way, what's one sweet thing happening in your life right now, right? It doesn't have to be life changing. It doesn't have to be extraordinary. Just maybe someone smiled at you. I don't know, right? But or maybe you're feeling a little bit stronger, right? Maybe you paid all your bills, right? Maybe you're simply breathing easier than you were a month ago, right? Sometimes evolution begins when gratitude notices like what the ego overlooks, right? So anyways, that was our moment, right? So let's tap in, let's turn on, let's tune into the strawberry full moon that's happening right now, right? This is the first full moon of the summer, right? And it's a micro moon, right? So most people hear that word and immediately might think, oh, so it's weaker, right? No, not at all, right? Micro moon simply means the moon is farther away from Earth in its orbit, right? The way that it appears, appearing slightly smaller in the sky, right? And sometimes what appears smaller actually invites us to go deeper, right? Supermoons often magnify external experiences, right? So micromoons often magnify internal awareness. So instead of shouting, right, this moon whispers, right? Instead of demanding, it's inviting, right? Sometimes the greatest revelations arrive quietly, right? So the strawberry moon isn't called the strawberry moon because it turns pink or red. It received this name because it's aligned with the traditional strawberry harvest. Right? A season where something was planted long ago, right? And it's become ready to be received, right? So notice that, right? Nothing ripens overnight, right? Everything matures through time, through nourishment, through consistency, right? And maybe that's exactly what this moon is asking of us, right? Where are the strawberries growing in your own life? What effort, relationship, dream, business, healing, or version of you has quietly been ripening beneath the surface, right? Sometimes we become so focused, right, on what's missing that we never pause long enough to celebrate what has finally arrived, right? So this full moon is reminding us that harvest is impossible without patience, right? So astrologically, this full moon occurs across the Cancer-Capricorn axis, right? So Cancer governs our emotional world, right? Our home, our inner child, our intuition, our nourishment, right? Our sense of belonging, right? And so Capricorn, it governs our legacy, right? Our responsibilities, our discipline, our careers, right? Our leadership, right? Our relationship with time itself, right? So this isn't about choosing one over the other, right? They're polar opposites, Cancer-Capricorn axis, right? But it's about integration, right? So can your ambition still have a heartbeat, right? Can your success still have softness, right? Can your productivity include peace? Can your schedule include your soul, right? Because if your outer kingdom is flourishing while your inner kingdom is collapsing, is that really success, right? So likewise, if your inner world is beautiful but fear keeps preventing you from expressing it, right? Are you honoring your gifts? So this full moon is asking us to really become whole, right? Not half successful, whole, right? So now let's layer, right, another extraordinary event on top of this, because while the moon is illuminating our lives, Jupiter, right, the planet of expansion, wisdom, abundance, right, faith, higher learning, purpose, and opportunity, it just entered Leo, right? So this only happens about once every 12 years. So anyways, think about that, right? For the next year, Jupiter is traveling through the sign of the lion, and Leo represents courage, right? Creative expression, leadership, visibility, the heart, authenticity, joy, right? Children, performance, and the willingness to be seen, right? So Jupiter expands whatever it touches. So collectively, we're entering an era where hiding becomes increasingly uncomfortable, right? So that means like many people, they're going to feel an internal pull, pulling you, right? So it's creating, teaching, leading, sharing, starting businesses, right? Launching projects, finding your voice, right? And speaking, right? Or stepping into roles that maybe you once believed you weren't qualified for. And now, and it's not about that this is ego, right? This isn't ego, it's not. This is expansion. There's a difference. Ego says, look at me, right? But expansion, it says this gift was never meant to stay hidden. One seeks validation and the other seeks contribution, right? So you ask yourself, where have I been waiting for permission? That life has already, right, been given to me, right? Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes courage is simply introducing yourself to the person you've always been becoming, right? All right, and so you also need to talk about something quietly unfolding, right, beneath all of this, and that's that Mercury retrograde that we were talking about. So go watch my other video, right? Mercury isn't retrograde yet, but we are now moving through the pre-shadow period, right? And so this matters, right? The pre-shadow is like walking towards a fog, right? The road still exists, but visibility begins to change, right? So you might notice conversations repeating, right? Or old people resurfacing, or things that need revision, right? The reads that we were talking about, right? Technology acting strangely, right? Schedules shifting, right? Emails being misunderstood, communication being misunderstood, right? Your intuition whispering, right? Double check that. Okay, where were we? The pre-shadow period, right? Anyway, the pre-shadow period isn't here as punishment, right? It's not here to punish you, right? It's here to prepare, right? So Mercury asks, right? Did you really mean what you said, right? Did you actually read that, right? Are you still in alignment, right? Did you leave unfinished conversations somewhere, right? Because Mercury doesn't only govern communication, right? It governs perception, right? And sometimes before life changes your direction, it changes your perspective, right? So one conversation can alter an entire lifetime, right? One sentence can heal. One sentence can wound, right? So choose carefully, right? Speak consciously. Listen completely, right? Sometimes we don't listen. Sometimes we wait to speak so that we can be heard, right? So, and sometimes wisdom isn't found in having the next answer. Sometimes wisdom is asking the next question. Granted, but it's also in the listening, right? So growth doesn't always ask you to become more. Sometimes it asks you to become more honest, right? And so under the strawberry moon, combined with Jupiter entering Leo, right? Combined with the Mercury preparing us for retrograde, right? Honesty is one of the greatest forms of freedom available to us, So let's bring this down from the sky, right, into our bodies, right? Because astrology was never meant to become another reason to fear the heavens, right? It was meant to become another language for understanding ourselves, right? The planets do not force us, right? They invite us, right? The moon does not make us emotional. It illuminates what was already asking us to be acknowledged, right? So the stars don't determine our destiny. They reveal possibilities. The choice has always belonged to us, right? So, all right, let's walk through the elements together, right? And because the elements are energy, right? And every single one of us carries all the 5 elements within our beings plus more. But we're just going to go there, right? Sometimes one simply asks to be heard louder than the others, right? And that's how I feel like with the elements, right? Like one asks to be heard louder than the others. Like sometimes we're not aware of every single element out there, right? And so some might go into, sometimes it could be hidden from us, right? So either way, we're going to talk elements in that kind of way, right? And we're going to start with fire, right? Fire is the element of will, right? Our willpower, action, right? Courage, creation, desire, right? The inner spark that says, I'm ready to move, right? So with Jupiter entering Leo, fire is being expanded, right? So, and Leo's ruled by the sun, right? So this is not quiet fire. This is visible fire, right? Heart fire, creative fire, leadership fire. You're getting the type of fire this is, right? The kind of fire that asks you to stop hiding behind preparation and start trusting the power of expression, right? But fire does have to be guided, right? Because ungrounded fire becomes impulsive, right? Reactive, combustive, burnout, right? But conscious fire becomes courage, purpose, visibility, movement, right? So this strawberry full moon is asking fire, ask fire, right? What brave decision has finally ripened? Where are you ready to stop waiting for permission, right? And where have you been dimming your light because you were afraid of being seen, right? This can apply in many kind of ways, right? Maybe you've been thinking about writing a book, right? Starting a podcast, teaching yoga, launching your own brand, business, right? Becoming a realtor, right? Opening your own brokerage, right? Hosting your very first event, right? Or making those cold calls you've been avoiding, right? Or posting content you've been sitting on, right? Or buying your first investment property, right? Selling the home you've outgrown, or finally saying yes to the dream that has been quietly waiting for you, right? So in those kind of things, right? Fire is asking, what if the thing you've been postponing is the very thing preparing to change your life, right? So don't overthink the spark. Protect it, feed it, honor it, right? Moving on, right? So we got earth, right? So earth is the element of form, right? Structure. It's our bodies, right? It's body, it's money, it's home, right? It's discipline, consistency, right? The tangible world, right? Earth is where manifestations stop being a cute idea and become a calendar, a habit, a foundation, right? A signed document, a body that feels safe enough to carry the dream, right? And because this is a strawberry moon, right? Full moon, earth matters deeply. Strawberries do not appear because someone wished hard enough, right? They grow because the roots were tended to, the soil was nourished, the season was honored, right? So earth reminds us that harvest follows patience, not panic, not comparison, not rushing, patience, right? So this full moon is asking earth, where have you been ignoring the evidence of your own growth? Where are you measuring yourself only by what is missing instead of what is already forming, right? And where do your systems need to support your sweetness? Come on now, right? Okay, maybe you're saving for a new home, right? Maybe you're building your credit. Maybe you're growing your business one client at a time, right? Maybe you're learning a new skill, or studying for your real estate exam, right? Or working toward a promotion, or organizing your finances, cleaning your house, creating a schedule, right? You're showing up every day even when the results have not caught up to your efforts yet. Or maybe you're planting roots in your personal life, creative life, professional life, spiritual life, whatever it is that you're doing, right? Just because the fruit has not appeared yet, you think nothing is happening. So earth reminds us, right? The unseen work is still work. Every solid foundation is built one freaking brick at a time, right? So do not underestimate consistency simply because it's not loud, right? So today's invisible effort becomes tomorrow's visible blessing, right? So we got air. Moving along. Air is the element of thought, the element of language, our communication, right? Our perspectives. It's about learning and our ideas. The story you tell yourself when things are not clear. Okay, let me stop. Right? But no, for real, seriously, it's the story you tell yourself and the story you tell the world. With Mercury and its pre-shadow period, right? Air becomes very important because this is where we must slow down. This is where we gotta read that again, right? That's when we have to speak once or not at all, right? Clarify instead of assume, right? Ask instead of accuse, right? Listen to understand instead of listening to respond, right? Mercury's shadow brings that recast, review, reflect, revisit, reframe, reconnect, rewrite, repair, right? Because we there, not because we are going backwards and shit, right? But because wisdom edits before it publishes. So air is asking, what thought has been running your life in the background? What conversation you need to have more honesty with, right? What messages need to be clarified? What belief is finally ready to be rewritten, right? Maybe it's like finally having a conversation with a business partner, or calling like a past client you have been meaning to reconnect with, right? Or maybe it's following up with someone who asked for information weeks ago, or maybe it's negotiating something, right? Maybe it's updating your resume, applying for a new position, pitching your ideas, sending a certain email, right? Making that phone call, or even wanting to make an effort in understanding someone else's perspective, saying, listen, I want to understand your perspective, right? Sometimes, like really, one conversation can change everything. So air reminds us, right? Communication creates opportunities that silence never will. And sometimes the timeline changes because one sentence finally gets spoken with truth, right? And so next on through, next on through, we got earth, fire, air, water, right? So water is the element of emotions, memory, our intuition, right? It's healing, it's softness, it's grief, it's sorrow, it's love, It's the inner tides, right? And we're in Cancer season, right? Cancer season is holding the sun during this full moon. So water is not just present. Water is asking us to come home to ourselves, right? Cancer is ruled by the moon. Water reminds us that emotions are not interruptions. They are information. Feelings are not always facts, though. But they are always invitations, right? They show us where something still needs compassion. Where we still need maybe some closure, right? Where something needs our care. So this strawberry moon in water, right? Is asking like, what sweetness have you refused to receive because survival trained you to expect struggle? Or what emotion is asking you to be witnessed instead of buried, right? And what part of your heart is ready to soften without losing its wisdom, right? Right? Maybe you're grieving someone who's still alive. Maybe you're mourning a version of yourself you have outgrown too. Maybe you're forgiving yourself for surviving something you never deserved. That's a great place to be, right? Maybe you're letting go of a deal that was not meant to happen, right? Or maybe, yeah, right? Maybe you're letting go of the idea that something is supposed to be one way and it didn't turn out that way, and you're letting go of that control of that narrative, right? Right? Or maybe even like accepting that a client chose another path. Those things happen, especially in real estate, right? Maybe you're releasing guilt over a decision you made with the information you had at that time, right? Or you're learning to celebrate your own success without questioning your own timing and actually allowing yourself to appreciate yourself, right? Maybe that's hard. That's sometimes hard for people, right? So either way, what it says, like, feel it. Feel it though without becoming it. It says witness it, right? Witness it without building your identity around it, right? Let emotions become visitors, not permanent residents, right? Because stagnant water can poison the one drinking it. But moving through the water heals, right? And then we got the ether, right? Ether is grand. Ether is within the in, right? The element that really cannot be held, right? But yet, even though it can't be held, it holds everything. It's the unseen, right? The field, the silence, consciousness itself, right? The space between one version of you and the next, right? Ether is where our intuition lives, right? Not fear, not fantasy, but presence, right? And ether reminds us that before anything becomes physical, it exists in the unseen. It's a thought, it's a feeling, it's a knowing, right? A pull, a dream, a frequency. So this is where, even with astrology, right, it becomes less about prediction and more about participation, right? Because every moon cycle becomes a quantum cosmic opportunity when awareness replaces autopilot, right? So ether is asking, who are you becoming while all of this is going down, right? All of this is happening, right? What frequency are you bringing into your rooms, your relationships, your business, your home, your healing, your creativity? Come on now. What's that energy scope of your being, right? Because your energy enters before your words ever do, right? Your nervous system speaks for you, your integrity speaks, your peace speaks, your alignment speaks. Real life. In real life. Right? And so imagine yourself in these spaces, these places, right? Walking into these places you want to be, right? Especially if it's like, even like for business, right? Sitting across from the client, your client, right? Or speaking in front of a room full of strangers, right? Or introducing yourself at events, right? Networking, right? People, that quote that they say, right? People may remember what you said, but they almost always remember how you made them feel, right? They don't always have to remember what you said. Wait, am I butchering it? Right? People may not always remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. Some shit like that, right? That's ether. Your presence is part of your message. Your energy is part of your brand. Your being is part of what you are building, right? And so the greatest investment is not only in your business, it is in your becoming, because your becoming is your business, right? Because when who you are aligns with what you do, everything you create carries that frequency too, right? Especially with this micro moon, right? This Jupiter and Leo expansion, right? It's not changing circumstances, it's reorganizing identity, and identity creates reality. So how do we honor this within us, this full moon, right? We be outside, right? We look up, right? Not because the moon needs your attention, my attention, but because your spirit may need the reminder that you're a part of something beautifully rhythmic, right? Turn your phone off for a while. I was asked the other day, like, how was I spending my time or whatever, and I didn't answer till like 24, 48 hours later or whatever the case may be, and that's because sometimes you gotta go hermit mode, you know what I mean? Turn off your phone. Sit in silence. Write. Stretch your body. Walk barefoot outside. Eat something that's good for you, that nourishes you. Thank your body. Thank your breath. Thank the version of yourself that keeps going. Even when nobody notices the effort you put. Harvest the gratitude anyways, right? Especially before harvesting any goals, right? Because abundance is not measured only by what arrives. It is measured by your ability to recognize what has already arrived. I'm trying to rhyme. Right? But either way, every moon cycle becomes a quantum opportunity for all of us, right? And especially when awareness replaces autopilot. That is where our timelines begin changing, right? Not because the universe suddenly notices us, right? But because you begin to finally notice yourself. So let's connect these dots before I gotta go, right? Because I always find this fascinating, right? Either way, I like that this moon is named after sweetness, because that's kind of like the energy I'm pulling in over, right? And especially that it's arriving while Mercury is asking us to review, right? So, and while Jupiter is asking us to expand, and Cancer and Capricorn are asking us to balance, right? The sweetness, let's pull in the sweetness, right? It's like the universe is saying, before I give you more, can you fully taste what you already have, right? Because think about it, right? How many beautiful moments have we rushed through because we were already chasing the next one, right? How many accomplishments do you even barely celebrate? You might celebrate others, grand, right? That's your heart on expand, right? But how many accomplishments have you celebrated of your own, right? Right? How many prayers have already been answered? And yet we're still talking to ourselves like nothing has changed. Right? So maybe abundance isn't only receiving more. Maybe abundance is finally recognizing what is actually here. So anyway, wrap up. This strawberry full moon is harvest. It's the harvest. It's harvest. It's the harvest. Get sometime. Mercury pre-shadow retrograde. Okay? Either way, Mercury says review the field, while Jupiter is saying expand the field. And Cancer is saying protect the field, while Capricorn says build the field. So do you see it? They're all talking about the same thing, just from different dimensions. Maybe that's why I love astrology so much, right? Not because I think the planets control us. Like, don't get it twisted, okay? They give us language, right? They give us language to experience what we've always been living, right? The skies become poetry, right? Nature is philosophy. The moon is a metaphor. And the planets are our teachers, right? Not dictators, just teachers. Forever student of life, right? Quantum physics tells us, right? The observer influences what is observed. And astrology asks us something very similar. If your awareness changes, what becomes possible? So if your perspective changes, does your life begin changing with it? Right? So maybe every full moon isn't changing reality. Maybe every full moon is changing the observer inside the reality. And once the observer changes, the timeline naturally begins changing too. Right? Think about it. Just think about it. The moon doesn't produce light. It reflects it. Pause. The moon doesn't produce light. It reflects it. How human is that? Sometimes we think we're waiting to become brighter, when maybe our job is simply becoming more willing to reflect the light already available to us, from us, within us, right? Maybe confidence isn't manufactured. Maybe confidence is remembered, infused. And with Jupiter entering Leo, the heart, the courage that we have to be seen. While Mercury says, before you become visible, let's make sure the story you're telling yourself is worthy of the person you're becoming. Because visibility magnifies identity. It doesn't replace it. And Cancer, at home in its sign, right, with Capricorn building the legacies, ask yourself, what if your greatest legacy isn't the business you build, the money you make, the house you buy, or the awards you receive? What if your greatest legacy is the nervous system you heal? So your children, your clients, your students, your friends, your family, and the people around you experience a version of you that your younger self never had, because that is evolution. I don't know about you, but I find comfort in knowing that the moon never tries to stay full. She waxes, she wanes, she disappears, she returns, she trusts the cycles, right? And I don't know, maybe perhaps that is our lesson too. You don't have to be your fullest every day. You only have to remain willing to return. I think that's beautiful. I think I'll cry. I don't know. Right? The life that expands the fastest is usually the one that first expanded its awareness. And an awareness changes everything. So with Jupiter expanding, right? And Mercury reviewing, and the strawberry full moon illuminating our harvest, reflect on what you're creating, right? I guess like the question is not only to ask, what am I creating? Maybe it's asking more, who is creating it? Because that answer changes every future that follows, right? I am rooted enough to remain steady, brave enough to be seen, wise enough to evolve, and open enough to receive what is already making its way towards me. And until next time, that's what I have for you. Bye.